Okay, so continuing on. You know what? I think I'm just going to work on the tail for a little bit here. Just going to get out of solo mode. I'm going to look at the model first. And you know what? I might as well just turn this off for now. Okay, so here's what we have so far. It's definitely looking a lot better than it did earlier when I just had done the basic colors here without all this detail here. Yeah, I think it's coming along just fine. One thing I don't still like very much is the tail overall. Now, granted, this model in the future will get retopologized and this tail might change in shape, but I think I should still definitely add some color to this character right now. So I'm just going to go back into color spray, turn on the alpha 07, make my radius a little bit smaller, and have a go. Now, right now I have two layers between the last session and this one. What I had is I went ahead and just finished up the fingernails on this character here. What I did is I just went ahead and just created a new layer, took a slightly brighter color than what I had on the outline here, and then just kind of filled it in. I didn't necessarily skip that yet because I will actually be showing how I finished off the fingernails, and I might even do what I did here on the foot nails here. So I might do that a little bit later. Or I probably will anyways. But I skipped it on this hand just because I worked on the fingernails here and I really didn't want to repeat that process all over again on the other side. And I just ended up taking it a little bit further than these ones here. But again, I will be showing the whole process of how I did that a little bit in the future. Okay, so the model looks good and it's time for me to work on the tail. Now, the tail, I'm just going to add some stripes like I did with the rest of the body. But of course that exists on this layer here. So I'm just going to go ahead and just select that layer. Of course, I selected the wrong intensity, so I'm just going to bring it back up to 1 and press record. So you have to remember that this is the record button here, and before you go ahead and start painting on any of these layers, you always have to select it, press record, and then that is going to tell ZBrush exactly which layer it is that you're working on and whether you want to record on that layer or not. So I have selected, I have pressed record, that's all good. I'm just going to sample one of the colors here. And you know what, I might as well just make it a little bit darker. Okay, that's good enough. And let's see what we get. I'm going to just start painting. So you know what, I'm just going to paint a little bit of a color here, like that. And I made the mistake of not working with symmetry, so I'm just going to turn on symmetry. I'm just going to go over this side, with the hope that, of course, that detail will be perfectly applied to the other side of the model as well. Now you might get some stretching like this. That's okay, just make your draw size a little bit smaller and just go down the center. And just zoom in. Just remember that if I zoom out, my cursor doesn't actually, my draw size doesn't actually change. It's always locked to the screen size, which is perfect because if I zoom in, I can automatically fill in certain details without having to adjust my draw size and do all that. So I can very easily just clean up parts by just zooming into an area without having to zoom in and then change my draw size and all the other stuff. So for this is perfect. Of course, we have the same problem underneath here. And of course, I am going to give a little bit of the underbelly color here to a small part of the tail. But for now, I just want to color it in and just want to get rid of these streaks that I had. Alright, so that's looking okay. For now, I just have the color kind of going down the tail here. But what I really want is I want to make sure that I have those same kind of stripes for at least a portion of the tail. Now, of course, I will have to darken up my color slightly. So again, I press space to get into this menu or right click. Either or works. Select your color in that color picker and then just go ahead and just start working. And of course, applying these stripes to the underneath part as well will work just fine. Of course, as I reach the end of the tail, I really don't want these streaks to be as strong anymore, these stripes. And I might even just color the end just completely black. Just darken it in, and then just fade it out towards the end here. I don't quite know how this is going to turn out just yet, but you know, that's okay, because right now I'm just kind of experimenting with what's going to work. So I look at this character, and do I like that dark tail or not? I'm not entirely sure. I might actually want it to go a little bit more reddish. I might just switch up the color. Now this I could have technically done earlier, or I could even make a new layer and just put in a little bit of red in there and fade that in. And you know what, that probably might be a better option for me to just go ahead and make a new layer and just color this in red like that. Of course, as I do this, it might also be a good idea to afterwards fade this out. Now this red is kind of strong, and you really should be, especially when you do things like this, you really should be looking at the character from a little bit further away. Does that red work? And in my opinion, it does not. So I will just select another color and just try to do the same. That's still too strong. I'm going to remove the saturation off that color. And that's getting a little better. But I guess the one thing I really don't like is the fact that this tail still is a little too red, so I will further remove saturation. Now I want just a tiny bit of saturation in there, but just not too much, because then it really brings in a lot of redness to the model. Meanwhile, there's really a lot of redness missing throughout the rest of the model. So I didn't want to overdo that kind of color treatment on that area. Now I'm just going to go back to this layer here. And you know what, I'm going to see how it looks when I fade it out. So right now I'm just painting in what I think might work. I'm still in kind of like an experimentation mode, and I will just keep creating layers until I come up with something that works. Now granted, eventually I will have a few too many layers, and I will in fact have to start erasing, or I'll have to actually bake my object. For now I don't have to worry about that yet, but sooner or later I will. And I know that I'm kind of quiet right now, but I'm just painting. Okay, you know what? I think that's going to work. I might still edit the colors a little bit later, but for now, this is good enough. Of course, this is going to look a lot different when this is animated. Right now it looks kind of boring just because it's straight out. I mean, again, once it's animated, or not necessarily animated, but as soon as I deform it into a non-linear shape like this, I think it's going to look very, very different. So let's go back into solo mode, and let's just go back and just start painting the legs here. So of course, I will not be changing any of my brush settings except maybe the color that I have here. Okay. And I will continue drawing these kind of stripes and patterns across the legs as well. Of course, I will be painting the exact same kind of streaks around the leg, just to kind of vary it up and make it more interesting. And of course, one thing I didn't do so far is, remember how when I was working on the leg, I also had a brush that I was kind of going over the surface to just kind of darken in the area before I really added any kind of spots on that area. So I might as well just do that. I'm going to lower the intensity slightly, and I'm just going to go over right here. Just try to bring in just one more layer before I go in and finally start adding more color variation to specific areas of the model. I'm just going to try to break in some areas here. And of course, once I do that, I will go back and of course I will try to do the same thing that I did here, where I was kind of breaking in and breaking up things apart. Definitely want to do a little bit more of that in the near future. And if it starts looking bad, that usually means I either have another layer. Like if you start getting something like this, it's usually because I have another layer, defining certain details, and then I'm just, it's not really meshing very well. So eventually, if you have too many layers, you might have a few complications here and there. And it might actually be a good idea to just go ahead and just eventually do something like just bake all your layers. So now I'm going to go back into my stripes. Maybe a few spots here and there. Of course, I really don't want to make these stripes too strong. I mean, I kind of do, but at the same time, I will kind of fade them out like I did with the arms. And sometimes, of course, that works better when your stripes are a little thicker, because then you'll have a little bit more room to kind of hint at that. Remember how I was drawing like inside these stripes to kind of add I don't know, almost like as if the black part of the stripe is kind of like an outline of the actual stripe color. So I'm going to pick another color, something lighter. I'm going to go back in and just kind of lighten that inside portion of the stripes. Now this should really be done on a different layer altogether so that I have more control. But for now, I mean, considering how little work I've actually done to the overall leg like this, I can always just add another layer and I can just fix up problems later, and I can just play around. Now, of course, I really don't like the fact that this, right now I kind of have these stripes going down onto here and then it just kind of disappears. So I'm going to go back and keep working on the leg and just darkening some parts up. Just the front section of this leg, I'm just going to keep darkening it up. And of course, that is going to add a little bit more contrast between lighter and darker parts, like I did before. And you know what? Just not to complicate my life with all this artifacting that's happening, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm just going to press record to get rid of the record mode. I'm just going to bake all these layers because honestly, the way it is right now, it's working out just fine. So I'm just going to bake all. And I'll continue in a few seconds.